I recently read a BFR report, and I felt the need to add my own experience in the same area. I, too, was a Forest Service employee for the Plumas County in the 90s. I don't know the original author. I hiked to the bottom of the Middle Fork drainage where the Pacific Crest Trail crosses the river from the Quincy side, north side, so I could brush it out and cut some poles and logs laying across the trail. First day, I had a couple of guys with me, and we knocked out a good portion of it that day. I came back later in the week to finish up the remaining few miles by myself. The tactic is to go down the trail heavy with water and saw gas and work your way back to getting lighter. I worked my way down the trail, maybe about 2.5 hours to the area where we left off. I started cutting my way back up the trail. The logs were spread apart, with patches of down logs and then areas of clear trail for several minutes of hiking. In the periods where I shut the saw off, I soon started to realize I was getting side-hilled by something that was downslope of me off the trail, maybe about 100 to 150 feet just inside the tree line. As I moved up the trail, it did also. If it was a lion, I would have never heard it, and bears are very noisy coming through the brush. This was not wildlife. This was clearly a bipedal footfall. By the time most of my work was done, I was getting a little spooked, and I just wanted to get back to the landing where my truck was parked. Unfortunately, I never got eyes on it, so I can't give you a visual account. I was only able to occasionally see saplings move. To be perfectly honest, I was too afraid to look. I had my head down, humping gear up the trail. I was light and moving at a good clip on a trail. This thing was easily able to outpace me, even though it was working through steep rocky brush and tree-covered terrain. At times it got ahead of me because of the contour of the land, and that was a little bit horrifying. This thing was agile and fast. This went on for a couple of hours. About a half hour from my truck, I stopped hearing anything. I feel I was being escorted out of the area. The whole experience was very unnerving. What bothers me the most is I don't know how long I was being watched for. I was running the chainsaw intermittently with earplugs in. I'm sure the three of us were being watched on the previous trip. We just couldn't hear anything with the saws running. I've spent a lot of time in the woods and still do in a professional capacity, but that was a new one. If anybody is thinking this is a person, I'll tell you right now, there is no flippin' way. We had a perfectly clear Class A Bigfoot Sasquatch sighting. Thursday, August 29th, 2019. 10 a.m. approximately. Northwest British Columbia. Highway 37, south of the Nass River Bridge. Very remote area with a construction mustering site nearby. Distance, about 50 yards. We were driving from Hyder, Arkansas in our motorhome. The Sasquatch came out of the woods, crossed 2 lanes of highway in perfect sight, and disappeared into the woods. Both my wife and I saw it. I still get chills describing the event. Based on our seated height in our motorhome, I would estimate the height at over 7 feet tall, walking almost completely erect. It never looked either way or hesitated before crossing the highway. It was intent in its purpose. Dark brown hair from head to foot. Chest was flat. Broad strides and long arms, but not ape-like. I couldn't stop as there was no shoulder to pull on, and the traffic that was present was limited to a large tandem logging trucks traveling at high rates of speed. I barely slept that night, trying to process what we saw, what it was or wasn't. If only I would have purchased that dash cam for our Alaskan trip. I feel fortunate in having seen this, and retelling the story brings a great deal of interesting response. The show is all that more interesting since I know they are out there. Having researched the subject further, the one we saw looked most closely to the Patterson-Gimlin photo, except our view was a complete profile only. I was accompanied by my wife and 15-year-old son. We had built a fire when the sun had set. I mentioned to my wife that Sasquatches are known to answer howls. I am on the BFRO site 4 days a week to track sightings and am a firm believer after reading Dr. Meldrum's book, Sasquatch Legend Meets Science. I made a howl like the 1994 Moaning Howl Ohio call recording on this site. I am a trained vocalist and can project my voice loudly. I cupped my face and let out a howl. It was answered. I was facing east and let out a howl every 30 to 60 seconds that was answered progressively closer. Astonished, I kept it up, and the return was always closer. My wife fled into the RV in fear. My son would not come out. I was not in fear, but in hopes of seeing a Sasquatch. I did not have my cell phone with me to record the Sasquatch returning howls. I grabbed my .44 Magnum revolver, just in case, and a flashlight, scanning the trees in hopes to see an illuminated red pair of eyes. As soon as I had my pistol in my hand, there were no more returning howls. I was never in fear, but in awe. There must have been 10 to 12 howls and returns. With the first reply, I would guess that the Sasquatch at least a mile away, and with the last, maybe a quarter mile to an eighth of a mile, if not closer. On June 30th, 2020, we returned home, and I had my wife and I and son listen to the 1994 Ohio howls. They were shocked that that was exactly what they had heard. If you haven't heard it, be sure to check out BFRO.net and check out the 1994 Ohio howls. I was visiting my family's former home and treated myself with a night's stay at the cottages. They lie along the road, running from Deadwood to Rockford. The campgrounds was empty save for me. Even the proprietor was not home. They have beautiful pastures and a huge assortment of farm life, from turkeys to quail to goats and llamas, donkeys and horses. Their fields run right up to the forest, probably not even a football field's length away. I was sitting outside, watching their antics and enjoying the evening air. Suddenly, something started to howl in the woods to the west. Everything alive in the place froze in the same moment, and all their heads, mine included, swiveled toward the sound. I cannot begin to describe it, but I had grown up in these hills and know it was nothing I could identify. The sound was somewhere between a howl and a scream, and just echoed. It went on for 3 to 5 minutes, and every creature stopped to listen. I didn't hear it again while there. I didn't tell anybody when I saw them next. Since then, I've listened to recordings to try and identify the sound, and the recent recording by the hunter out of Canada is an exact match. That's what impelled me to report it. I was driving home from work in the afternoon and completely preoccupied with my thoughts of my struggles when my eyes caught something. However, my mind was still not focused other than I was waiting for movements of sorts. It's second nature to keep an eye out for deer in this area. When I finally noticed that I was looking at something unusual, I saw a tall, hairy animal walking off into the woods on 2 feet from the road. It had long blonde to light brown hair all over. I never saw the face. I kept my eyes focused on the woods where it walked into. When I reached that spot, I was completely shocked at the size that the creature was. It had to be at least 9 to 10 feet tall. The only thing I could think of was Bigfoot. Quick note, I have never been a believer of Bigfoot before, but what I saw that day is something I can't stop thinking about. There were several cars in front of me too. There could have been other witnesses. One reason I noticed the Bigfoot was because the traffic was slowing down. It is second nature in this area to be aware of wildlife, so I was looking for a possible deer on the road when I noticed it. It was around 4 to 5 p.m. with good lighting, and it was mostly sunny or a clear day. The sunlight was not direct enough to cast shadows though. It was perfect lighting for a photo shoot. I was on the Little Miami bike trail, heading back to Morrow from Oregonia, mile marker 23.5. It was Sunday, April 12th, around 5 p.m. in the afternoon. Since the COVID restrictions were enacted a week or two prior, the trail had become so crowded every day of the week. However, a cold front came in, and it was a cool, cloudy day, and very few people on the trail. Maybe 20 riders encountered from Oregonia to Kings Mill. Well, maybe more, but not bad. I'm retired and ride this route nearly daily, weather permitting. So after passing under the former Jeremiah Morrow Bridge, I-71, over Little Miami River, there's a long, gentle arc in the trail. I haven't seen a soul since I turned around at Wilmington Road. I'm cruising. It's nice and quiet, when suddenly, I heard a loud knock. So distinct that I instantly said in my head, that was a knock. It came from atop the hill to the east. I pondered all the conditions. Kids playing, not. Cold, remote, and they don't play in the woods anymore. Adult messing, maybe. But how would they know I was there? Natural, very doubtful. I'm nearly 68 and never heard anything so crisp, clear, like a Louisville slugger, full speed against a barkless solid ash tree, or so I imagined. Therefore, that's what happened. I look online to see if any Bigfoot sightings had been reported in this area, and found none. I stored the incident away until last weekend when I was talking to my son. He's 46 in May. I raised him near Morrow. Our school district includes the Mainville area. One of his good friends lived on a hillside at a 90-degree curve on a nearby road. His friend and his older brother, 20 years ago, he and his dad both saw a Bigfoot walking through the woods on the opposing side, 2 different times. The older brother said he never related this until he told me, because of my knock story. He said he'll never forget it. And because of his story, I tell you my story. Thank you for reading.